And this first one from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the Patient Engagement Collaborative, or PEC. That's an interesting name. The idea for this has actually been around since 2017, but what is it? Well, the Patient Engagement Collaborative is a group of patient organizations and individual representatives who discuss how to achieve more meaningful patient engagement in medical product development and other regulatory discussions at the FDA. So what's really cool about this is FDA is actually bringing real patients, or people who advocate for patients, or people who care for patients, in to talk about the patient experience. If you've had to be a patient, you know that it can usually stand some improvement. And there are ways that the medical devices themselves, how people are trained to use them, how the devices themselves work, can be made a lot better. And so I'm glad that this is a focus, not only for industry, but also for FDA. So this Patient Engagement Collaborative exists, and in fact, this was started in 2017 because in public comment, patient communities commented to FDA that, having a group to provide input on patient engagement across the agency might not be a bad thing. They took example from the European Medicine Agency's Patients and Consumers Working Party. So there was actually an example of patients getting to talk to the regulatory agency about their experiences. If you were to be a part of this, and here's the thing, are you a patient? Are you a caregiver? Are you somebody who works alongside patients in a way that would give you a voice into their experience? You can apply for this committee. You can apply. You don't have to be in medtech development. You don't have to be a doctor. You don't have to be a regulator. If you're a patient with a lot of experience, or you are a caregiver who can really advocate for patients, this could be for you. If you were included in this discussion topics, things that the agency would be talking about with you as a group, creating new models for patients to collaborate as partners in the medical product development and regulatory review process, thinking about ways to make patient engagement more systematic as opposed to having to create a whole PEC just to make it happen, ways to improve transparency, enhancing communication tools between the FDA and the patient community. Maybe you would be involved in making that, or educational tools, or at least advising on what could be made, both towards the patient community as well as on the medical product regulatory process. How should patients be engaged in that? So like we said before, members to this process can be patients, they can be caregivers who have a personal experience supporting someone with a health condition. They could be a caregiver, a parent, child, partner, family member, or friend, as well as representatives from patient groups. Those would be like advocacy folks who have worked with a particular type of patient for a number of years. So here's the thing. The new PEC member application period at FDA is open. PEC members participate in 2 to 4 virtual meetings per year, so you don't have to travel. You've just got to get on Zoom 2 to 4 times a year. They're looking for up to 8 new members, and they're for 2-year appointments beginning in January of 2024. But here's the thing, they're only taking 75 applications. So like if all the people who watched this video signed up for it, they'd be full, right? So take a gander at this. If you know somebody, maybe you know somebody who is been a patient or been engaged in advocacy for a particular patient type, they should know about this. They can go, the link is in the YouTube description. They should go, at least apply, submit their resume. I don't believe there's any pay for this, but if you're really passionate as a patient or a caregiver, an advocate, this is a place where you can get involved with FDA directly and have something to say to contribute to the process. So it's going to become one of our new mottos here at MedTech Crossroads, but time spent learning for free from MedTech Crossroads will save you headaches in your MedTech journey. So what can we learn from this patient engagement lesson that we just heard about, that patients can get engaged with FDA? Some of the application areas that we want to bring back to your attention more regularly include the FDA regulatory process, startup life, market research, technical development, reimbursement, fundraising, intellectual property, project management, testing, and manufacturing. I selected 5 of these today for this patient engagement aspect. Now, I chose FDA regulatory process, startup life, fundraising, project management, and testing. And longtime listeners of the show will know that if we start talking about patients and usability, it affects every part of the development process, all the way from your fundraising, all the way to your post-market work. But let's think about just a few things related to that. Everything that we do does flow ultimately from the user. Now, that could be the patient or the caregiver. But in this case, patient concerns, the fact that FDA is trying to consider those better and to actually involve patients in the process, it really should be companies that are leading the way. So the admonition here would be to get to know your user. That comes down to very practical ways like usability. But let's go to that fundraising aspect. Your funders will care a lot, your investors will care a lot if you're actually talking to real users, if you actually have an idea what the market is like. There's too many pitch decks out there where they have all the projections from market size and they make a guess that they're going to capture somewhere between 1 and 10% of that market, and look how great it's going to be. But the reality is, unless you know how that's going to get to those users and whether those users are going to adopt it, what their actual concerns are, chances are you could get all the way through the development process, all the way through the regulatory process, ramp up manufacturing, only to find that your users don't really like the product, it doesn't meet their need, and it won't address where they truly are as humans. So I think this actually provides an interesting opportunity, because companies can be motivated to try to stay a step ahead of the FDA. If FDA is talking to patients about their experience, then companies, shouldn't you be talking to your patients, to your users? You can then go back and compare your notes, because these meetings are going to be publicly available information. What FDA is learning from them is publicly available. If you go down to the link on YouTube in the description, you'll find that you can see all the past meetings of the patient engagement committee. And you can see if what they're saying lines up with what your company is finding in your market research. And I didn't flag market research. Maybe I should have there. Why did I flag startup life? Well, regulatory process is obvious. If FDA is going to be asking user questions and talking to patients, then they're going to bring those to the clearance process. They're definitely going to bring them to the clearance process. So it's going to affect you there. But why startup life? Well, because what you're experiencing in your startup comes down to all these other factors. If FDA is going to be asking you about this, you got to make it part of your culture going out and talking to users. Every day we see startups who are academic, naive to their user base. Other times we see startups that are passionate about their user base. Sometimes they themselves were patients. Sometimes they themselves were doctors or are doctors who care about this condition deeply. And it often motivates them to do interviews of patients, show them early prototypes, show them early demos. Now, of course, FDA is not going to ask these patients in this advisory committee, what do you think about company X's product? That's not going to be the point at all. But this should just raise in your company culture a focus on the user, on the patient, thinking about them, interacting with them, getting their opinion. Because if FDA is, shouldn't you? How about project management and testing? Here's where it really meets the road. People always want to jump ahead. They want to go to, I've got my design, I must be ready to manufacture it. Oh, and I guess testing fits in there somewhere. So let's talk about these two together. Testing, verification and validation of your medical device. comes down to the requirements and the user needs that you set at the outset of the project or developed along the way. Where do those requirements come from? Well, sure, some of them come from industry standards or risk analysis, which you sometimes can do sitting at your desk. But a lot of them flow downstream from what's going to make a usable product for your users, for your patients. And a lot of that, if you're not talking to them and you make forward progress, it might be negative progress or it might be neutral progress. Because you think, I'm developing a product, but if we come back 6 months later and we find out that the user wanted something, that the patients needed something, that they were happy with certain types of solutions, but they weren't happy with other types of solutions, you're actually backing up at that point. Sometimes that progress can be entirely wiped out if the way that you mean for this product to interface with that patient suddenly isn't acceptable anymore. So all of this just a motivation to get out there and think about those patients. Do you have comments? Do you have questions about this? Do you have something to add to this discussion? How can thinking about patients increase the efficiency of the process that we're all engaged in out here in the world of medtech development? Feel free to drop a note in the YouTube comments or to pop it into Zoom. Those of you listening on Zoom, we'd love to hear from you. You can also reach us at contact@medtechcrossroads.com. And as always, if you like what you're hearing, please do subscribe to us on YouTube.